Well, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us here at the March 20th meeting of the Humboldt County Association of Governments Board. At this time, we'll call this meeting to order, and can we get a roll call?
Chair Johnson,
Here.
Supervisor Madrone,
Present.
Councilmember Napier,
Here.
Mayor Burgell,
Here.
Councilmember Atkins Salazar, Councilmember Jorgensen,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Kenny,
Here.
Councilmember Orr,
Here.
Pack Member Arroyo,
Here.
Pack Member Allstrand.
Here.
Thank you. First order of business is to adjourn as the HCOG Board and reconvene as the Policy Advisory Committee. And at this time, we'll ask for public comment on non-agenda items. And seeing none, we'll close public comment and move to the consent calendar. We have 4 items. Approval of the meeting record from February 20th, the City of Blue Lake fiscal year 24-25 LTF claim, fiscal year 24-25 low carbon transit operations program allocation, and fiscal year 25-26 state transit assistance and state of good repair allocations. Would anyone like to pull anything? Seeing none, is there any public comment on these items? Can we entertain a motion?
Move approval of the consent calendar.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Thank you. And we come to our action item, one of them, the Regional Transportation Plan Project Prioritization Ad Hoc Committee.
Okay, so the first action item before you tonight is the prioritization of a ad hoc committee, or an RTP prioritization ad hoc committee. The TAC members have had multiple discussions regarding prioritizing projects that are in the Regional Transportation Plan. And from those discussions, they had talked about prioritizing projects and also adding a policy to help leverage additional funds. One of the discussions was if there was a policy in there for having funds set aside for a local match, that some of the agencies would be able to, get grant funds and use some of that STIP money for a local match. One of the things that the TAC did make clear is that they are not in favor of ranking projects that are listed in the RTP. And so from those multiple discussions, it was decided that they wanted to form an ad hoc committee to explore mechanisms or policies that could be part of the RTP that can help leverage other funds. And so with the board's approval of that ad hoc committee, we did get 6 volunteers from our TAC to sit on that ad hoc. And so with board approval, that committee will be formed, and what they come up with will be brought back to you for review and final approval. So I'll turn it back over to you for questions.
Well, thank you. Yes, Supervisor Madrone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Debbie, for your presentation. I like the idea of, having it set up so that all the various cities, county, and everybody can look at how they leverage these funds to bring in additional funds. That makes a lot of sense. But I'm just curious how do the decisions get made as to what projects get funded if they're not prioritized in the RTP?
Well, one of the discussions that was discussed at the last TAC meeting And in the years of my being at HCOG, whenever the RTIP and STIP cycle come around, which is every couple of years, the TAC has always worked really well together and cooperating and taking turns of who gets that money. And so it's never been on a ranking process, but it's always been on a, like, who brings what project forward and what they think is a priority. We do have Brendan here who was part of the TAC, and so he can help answer some of that as being part of that process too. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Brendan, or?
If you'd like to discuss how, because the decisions are made and
Yes.
the sausage making.
We love the sausage. To speak to your question, Supervisor Madrone, so how we normally approach this is we have STIP cycles every 2 years. Of course, we have the projects each jurisdiction does in the RTP that we are seeking funding for. The way we approach it is what Director Madsen likes to call a collaborative process. So we come together, we take some initial steps to identify what should be the priority in a cycle, and the types of considerations we put into that are, if there's a project of specific regional importance in a particular cycle, if there's a project that needs a little bit of gap funding in order to go from being not quite there to being whole, to go through construction, let's say, or if there's a project that has its next step in its delivery cycle that's ready to get that funding so it can keep moving forward. We also try and think about it from an equitability perspective. So, of course, typically there's not as much funding as we would all care for, and we all have a lot of projects. So, we try to make sure that the other jurisdictions like the Riadells and the Blue Lakes that may not have as much funding year over year, that they still have the opportunity to get some good projects in their communities as well. So to answer your question, we really kind of work at it from a collaborative perspective, and we really try to make sure that the types of projects we're funding also go through the entirety of the spectrum, between Fix It First, between ATP related projects, between projects that improve the roadways and provide non-motorized benefits. So to kind of sum it up, we really just try and take that approach, recognizing we all have different needs and different priorities, and we just need to find a way to make a difficult situation work. And I will note I've been on the TAC for 6 years, which has been 3 STIP cycles. This future one will be a 4th, and every decision that we've brought forward has been unanimous on the TAC level. So.
Well, thank you for that response, and I very much applaud the work that you do in that regard, because I think what you're saying in a sense is that if you try to go into our ranking process, it could create competition.
Yeah.
And because everybody's like, well, I want to make sure my project gets ranked high enough, and it might actually take away from that collaborative process. So I applaud you guys, and I've heard that before. Tom Madsen has told me many times that he is very impressed with how the TAC works in such a collaborative way. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and that's just to echo your sentiment. That's the biggest reason that the TAC is hesitant to do that same thing too, because as anybody who's gone for a grant application or other things that have a criteria or a rubric that you try and fit your project or your issues into, there's going to be winners and losers with that.
Yeah.
And we're too small of a county, and we have too many diverse needs to really be thinking about only doing potentially one type of work.
Right.
So our needs are more diverse than that. So
I appreciate that. And one of the lessons I learned a couple of years ago before I got on HCOG was that if your project's not on the RTP, it's not going to be considered for funding. Like Scenic Drive, for instance, it wasn't on the RTP for years and years. It is now. And there were reasons for that, but it was nice to learn that. And what I also learned was that in order for a project to get on the RTP, there needs to be an entity that's sponsoring it, because they're going to be the ones dealing with operation and maintenance and all that kind of stuff. So thank you. I feel more educated tonight. Appreciate both your responses.
absolutely, anytime.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brendan.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I had a quick question. Probably,
Get your mic. Come on, Mike.
probably Debbie could answer it, just so I understand the procedure. So the ad hoc committee advises the TAC, and then the TAC advises us? Is that how
Correct.
it works? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Good question.
thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, Supervisor Arroyo.
Thank you. So
From what I recall, there's a list of projects, but they're not prioritized or ranked, that are priorities for all the jurisdictions. That's like an appendix to the RTP. Is that still the case? I should have looked before this at how those are framed. But so it sounds like this is coming from the TAC, a desire to have more clarity about prioritization, not from this body. It's coming a request from the TAC to help inform that. Is that correct?
I'm not sure I quite understand your question. The TAC wants to, I'm going to refer to Brendan again. You can explain it.
Is the TAC wanting something from
Discussion
us?
has gone on long before I stepped in.
I think where we're really coming from here is the TAC wants to, again, going back to the reality we live in where the funding sources are so limited and we have a lot of really big, great projects we want to bring forward. We're trying to find ways and even explore if there are ways that work within the STIP to leverage more funding, to leverage grant funding, to be able to, as an example, and I'll just give a theoretical situation. In Fortuna, we're advancing a number of very large interchange projects that by their very nature will have to be federally funded or at least significantly state funded to go forward. When you're going with those grant applications, depending on the program you're going to, there could be funding limits, there could be match requirements. There's just the general competition and competitiveness of it. And if we could come together collectively with some ideas that could be included in the RTP, say as policy, or kind of a guiding vision for how some of the STIP money is intended to be split, whether that's for match for a priority project, we'll call it, not a ranked but a prioritized project. That's really what we're wanting to explore, if something like that is even possible. The STIP has limitations because it's a solicitation-based application method. But really just want to explore if there's something we could do to better position member agencies in getting funding through grant applications. That's really the meat and potatoes of what the intent of the ad hoc committee is to explore that, because it's probably more of a discussion than would be done in the tax setting, as an example.
Because my experience looking at that list of projects in the past has been that they're, for one, they're really finite. There's a list of specific projects. And so if there's a funding stream that doesn't fit with those exactly, then, and there's another project that is kind of boxed out, that obviously that list of projects is a greater dollar amount than will ever be funded in one fell swoop. So I'm wondering if what you're looking for is like a criteria or a way of saying, like, look, if it meets all these multimodal objectives, and it's an area with a collision history, and it does X, Y, and Z, then it's gonna be something that we can put forward as a priority and give example projects, but not limit it to those. Is that the kind of framework that you're thinking would be helpful?
It could be something like that, and even that would be part of the exploration of what it would be. Is how do you establish what a prioritized project is in the RTP, or does every agency get to identify a priority in their jurisdiction that would be eligible potentially to try and leverage some match funding? So all of that would need to be brought forward as part of the discussion and as part of the recommendation as it comes out of the ad hoc and as it goes through the TAC and up to the HCOG board ultimately. If that answers your question. Yeah.
I think so, yeah. So
Yeah,
you're asking for help and guidance in kind of getting aligned around how to pick projects.
Well, not only just how to pick them, that's a piece of it. And what we want to do is be inclusive, again, of the project types and of the fact that we have diverse priorities. But is there a way that would be helpful in a future funding application to say, hey, our RTP has a policy for set-asides for grant applications for certain project types, and we're an identified project, and on your budget for said grant application, you could fill that out and show a complete budget that looks, attractive and competitive for a funding agency. That's the main portion of the discussion as it's come around now. Not that it won't have potentially other components to it as it relates to it, but.
Okay, thanks. And I'm reading the staff item and just seeing it doesn't sound like any of us are going to be asked to be on the TAC. It's a subset of people that are already on the TAC. So I appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, one good thing about it is that when you look at the list of people on here, or if you just don't look at the person, but look at the agency or whatever, it's representing the communities around it. And you've got a big player, Caltrans, you've got Transit, you've got member from the tribes, and you've got a public works and engineering staff. So it's a well-rounded committee that will hopefully be able to get a sense from the community and be able to do that. And it never hurts to have your project on the RTP, and whether it's priority or not, because when the funding comes up, that helps to make the grant application better. So, any other comments? Any public comment on this item? Yes, Mr. Colin Fisk.
Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. Colin Fisk with the Coalition for Responsible Transportation Priorities. As y'all will know, if you've kind of been around HCOG for a while, this is a recurring topic of conversation and one that we have weighed in on several times. I think it certainly makes a lot of sense to have some sort of prioritization process, certainly to figure out how to maximize leverage of external funding. I think it still is a bit of a mystery to me, the resistance to having any sort of quantitative ranking or prioritization process. I think, one of the enduring problems with the way that regional transportation plan has been constructed is that there's been the policy section, which lays out goals and strategies and policies, and then there's been the project lists, which have historically just been lists of projects submitted by agencies without any sort of analysis of how they do or do not reflect the goals and strategies and policies in the policy part of the RTP. And so that's never made too much sense to me. And I think it would be very beneficial to connect those two in this next round of the RTP, and to actually use the policy goals to assess and prioritize the projects that are listed. I also think, and I certainly appreciate that the TAC has a collegial process by which these things are negotiated every round. But that being said, the upshot of that from a public perspective is that it's very opaque. There is not a consistent standard by which projects are judged. It's just sort of worked out every time. And so, from the perspective of public transparency and consistency and ability to actually meet the policy goals in the RTP, we would really strongly encourage that this committee be charged with, connecting the policy part of the RTP with the projects and prioritizing them in a clear and transparent way. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none. Any more comments from the board? Yes.
So in looking at the staff report, there's a recommended motion, and it says the PAC recommends that the HCOG board consider approving the formation of an ad hoc committee. And we have 6 volunteers that have been offered up from the TAC to establish a policy for prioritizing transportation projects listed within the RTP. So that motion seems to suggest that there would be some sort of a process for prioritization, or at least that's what the board would be asking the TAC to do. That doesn't conflict with what we've been talking about here. I'm just, on one level we were talking about not prioritizing, but then the motion that's listed here as a recommendation talks about prioritizing. If I remember right, in the RTP, there are columns of things like, does it meet multimodal? Does it do this? Does it do that? Et cetera. And they get a little check mark if they meet it. That's a self-certification process of whether or not it meets those 7 or 8 or whatever it is categories. But is that not used then as a form of prioritization at all? I mean, well, it's self-certifying, so yeah, that's opaque, I guess, again. But I'd just like your thoughts, Brennan, if you might, on this motion talks about prioritization, but yet we're talking about leaving it a little more collaborative. I'm still just a little confused, so sorry.
You know, the devil might be in the details with that one, so to speak. I would say the intent of the term prioritization is, again, figuring out what those. I would think that at the TAC level and at the agency level, we wouldn't just want any old project to be able to fall under the category of being able to leverage a special fund or something like that. So the term prioritization is really, what are those projects? What is that subset of projects? You know, again, is it one in each agency? Is it measured regionally? How does that look? And I would draw, with the intent of where the TAC has discussed this, I would draw the difference between prioritization and ranking.
Okay.
Because ranking, you know, comes down to, again, maybe some sort of a rubric style process, and that's, you know, what we have been hesitant to explore, because the things that we're looking at are just so diverse and so hard to really dive into on that scale. It is a self-certification process that we do, but I will note, you know, as part of projects making it into the RTP and being considered and voted on in the TAC for recommendation for STIP funding, those are reviewed by all the member agencies with technical staff. We're looking at the project study reports as they're submitted that have project components to them. You know, so all of the components included in a project that would warrant the type of self-certification sought is there and available for review and consumption. So.
Okay. Well, that sounds great. And in response to the public comment, it sounds like as you develop your process further to more immoralize your existing process and or come up with a little more description of how you operate and all that, that would probably be a really great thing for the public to understand, I think, and be responsive to the comment that we heard here today. So this motion as it's written works fine, if I'm hearing you correctly.
I would say so, recognizing the intent, and this was the intent of, I'll just be honest, the motion I made at the TAC, which is to find a way to determine prioritizing projects, whatever that is, and again, not with the intent of ranking, specifically with not that being the intent, quite honestly, and then to explore the nexus between that and funding.
Okay.
So,
Oh, thank you.
yeah.
Well, with that, Mr. Chair, I would be willing to make a motion, if that's okay.
Yes.
And the motion would be the PAC recommends that the HCOG board consider approving the formation of an ad hoc committee to establish a policy for prioritizing transportation projects listed within the regional transportation plan.
Second.
I do have a quick comment. So can you explain why it says recommends instead of will do? It seems kind of vague. Like, if this is what we're doing, why would it say recommend? We do.
Because the board makes the decision, not the...
Okay. I'm good then. Thank you.
The board will approve the PAC recommendations on agenda item 7. So
Thank you.
It's wonky.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second, and this calls for a voice vote. So all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Thank you all. And we will now move to item B, Humboldt County Regional Vision Zero Action Plan Consultant Selection.
Okay, so the next action item you have is the consultant selection for the Humboldt County Regional Vision Zero Action Plan. And as you recall, last month I let you know that we had sent out the RFP. We did receive 3 proposals. Those were sent to a reviewing committee. And the reviewing committee unanimously did recommend Smith Group to be the ones to complete that action plan. Smith Group also has some local subconsultants, which is the Redwood Coast Action Agency and GHD, that will be helping with that process. And I will turn it back over to you for if you have any questions.
Thank you. Again, they have a very well worked out plan for how they're going to approach this task.
They did, yes.
And again, community involvement, and so that's always a positive. But does anyone on the board have questions or comments? I think it's a very good thing, and I like their reference back to the local road safety plan, which you might be able to use as a launching point for this project. And I think there's a lot of good to happen out of this.
Yes, and I will point out that this item did go before the Technical Advisory Committee, and they unanimously went with the selection or the rating for the Smith Group.
Well, thank you. Is there any public comment on this item? See none. Yes.
I guess I will just jump in here as a member of the TAC and also as a proposal reviewer, and just echo that I believe that Smith Group put together a really excellent proposal, structured in a way in their scope and where they put their hours in their budget, which I think will be a really great tool for the region and a really great opportunity to build on our local road safety plans and have a big public outreach component and a big pilot project component to it too, which I know we're all excited about. So thank you.
And thank you. I guess at this point, we're for a motion.
Well, I'll move that that HCOG adopt the Smith Group proposal. I don't have my agenda in front of me because my, okay. Yeah, I will move that wait a minute. That the board direct the interim executive director to enter into contract negotiations with Smith Group to complete the Humboldt County Regional Vision Zero Action Plan.
Second.
So again, we have a motion and a second and a voice vote. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. So we move on to our next item, and thank you. And always get the number crunchers, huh? Our fiscal compliance auditor consultant selection.
Yes, so this year, our contract with Keith Borges, Anderson, Lucas, Somerville, and Borges ends, and so we had to solicit a new auditor, and we were really happy to receive 2 proposals for this one because we've done this in the past and have not received any. Both of the auditing firms are from out of the area. There aren't any local ones that do specific TDA audits like Anderson, Lucas, Somerville, and Borges. We did have a few people score those audits, and it was unanimous that they go with Davis Farr, the CPA out of Irvine, California. And the total cost of those 2 proposals was pretty significant. And Davis Farr had, just their proposal was better in meeting what we need here at HCOG. And so the recommendation is for us to go into contract negotiations with Davis Farr to complete the next 3 years of audits.
Well, thank you. And again, is there any board questions, comments? I know that make sure that we're in compliance with all the requirements from Caltrans and other funders, and keeps us out of trouble, makes sure that the people that come to us for funding are getting their funding and held accountable. So this is an important job, and like everything else that we know of, it's gone up in cost. So, but we want to make sure that we're in compliance. So, yes.
So when you did put it out, so there were no local people that actually bid on it? Nobody
There
came
weren't
forward?
any local people who bid on it. And from the past, when I have sent out RFPs, I have actually contacted some local firms, and just none of them are familiar with the TDA guidelines and those rules. So it's really difficult to find an agency that is able to do the TDA audits.
Thanks for that clarification.
Our local funder, our local auditor could not participate this year.
They can't. Well, I received a letter probably 6 years ago saying that we had to find another firm, and because I didn't get responses, they sent me a letter saying that they would let us go ahead with Anderson, Lucas, Somerville, and Borges for, a couple more years. But then this last time they said, this is the last time, now you have to find somebody else.
Yep.
So again,
Funded mandate.
yes, I was going to use those. We had to go with the state mandate that we do this. So, no other questions or comments? Well, we could entertain a motion. Well, let's get public comment. I'm sorry. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none.
I'll make the motion. I move that the PAC recommends that the HCOG board direct the interim executive director to enter into contract negotiations with Davis Farr to complete the fiscal year 24-25 and 2025-26 and 2026-27 fiscal and compliance audits.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Voice vote, so all in favor? Aye. Opposed? None? Okay, we move on. So, by motion, we can reconvene as the HCOG board, and at that time, we will be approving the PAC recommendations.
Motion to reconvene? Motion to reconvene.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? So we have reconvened as the HCOG board, and we come to staff and PAC member reports.
So, last month Supervisor Madrone had brought up that that I was sitting on the funding work group for the Measure O, the tax Measure O, and so I just wanted to provide a little bit of an update on that and get some direction from you. Sean Quincy, the Deputy Administrative Officer with the county, did come to our SS TAC meeting and provided them with some information and how the transit portion of those funds will, how the SS TAC will be participating in that and how those funds will be spent. One of the things that they have asked is if those funds can be come through HCOG, the transit portion. And I said that that would not be a problem, so I want a direction from you all if you want. I do have a meeting with Sean tomorrow to talk about the logistics of how that's going to happen. And so I don't know if you want me to bring that back to you for an action item, or it would be disseminated like our STA funds are and our TDA funds. So I can make another report of how that's going to happen and bring it back as action, or if you just want that to be something that goes through like our STA.
It would probably be good. Is it formulaic based like the TDA and STA?
It's not. So it'll be like a solicitation process, and so it's not formula based like the LTF.
Okay. And would there be kind of like on when we see it where it's checked off for ridership, tires, service work?
Anybody that has transit is going to be eligible for this. So we have the paratransit operators or, general transit. So I've been told that there is not any limitations on what transit agencies will be able to ask for these funds. And so HCOG, the way that we do our TDA is we send out a solicitation, and when they bring those projects in, it's then taken to the TAC, and then it would be brought to the board for final recommendation.
Yeah, I was just thinking, having outside eyes look at it, well, where'd this money go? What was it used on? Blah, blah, blah.
There's going to be an oversight committee that's not with HCOG, but in general with the Measure O money. And so I think we have to do reporting to that on how these funds are all spent.
Perfect. That's all I was wondering about. Any other questions for, yes, Supervisor?
Oh, just a comment. Thank you, Debbie. We're trying to be really flexible with this money because we don't know what's going to happen with the federal budget, which supplies a lot of funding for transit. And so, what it gets used for, we'd love to see it be enhancement to the existing system, but it could very well have to be plugging holes depending on where things go. So as at the county, our ad hoc committee that Debbie sat in on, we were trying to be pretty nimble with how we utilize these funds and trying not to make it too regulatory heavy in terms of making sure the money really goes to the need. So just a little addition there.
Yeah, can I, a little more background. Is this related to the question of money going to either road repair or transit service?
Yes.
Okay.
And I believe this item is going to the Board of Supervisors on their April 14th or 15th meeting.
That sounds about right.
And decide, and that at that meeting, they're going to decide what the split is going to be, correct?
Yeah, so the county set up an ad hoc with 2 supervisors, myself and Supervisor Wilson, along with 8 other members of the community, including Debbie representing HCOG. We had HTA there. We had Tom Matson for Public Works. We had a representative from the building trades, a representative from the Builders Exchange. So we had union and merit shop representation. We had Colin Fisk there representing, strong transit advocacy in the public. I think that was it. Anyway, there was 10 of us, and we talked for a couple of hours. Primarily, the ad hoc was given the objective of giving a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors on the Measure O split. How much should go to transit and how much should go to roads? And we all agreed that what we told the voters was that the vast majority of this money was going to go to roads. But the committee, we threw out our ideas and we came up with an average from that group of 10 people that 14%, this is a recommendation to our board, that 14% would go to transit and 86% would go to roads. Our board could change that, could keep it, we'll see what happens. And that the transit money would go through the social services TAC with a recommendation to the board and the HCOG board, and then the HCOG board would provide a recommendation to the county Board of Supervisors. Whereas the Measure O roads money would be Tom Matson putting together a roads plan and bringing that to the TAC annually to do what he calls a smell test of, how does this look? And again, much like Brendan was talking about, trying to be really smart with how we spend this money, not spreading it all over the county, but trying to focus it so that you're not spending a ton of money on mobilization, demobilization, going from Witchbeck to, Garberville, et cetera. So, and we have a lot of faith in Tom. He knows our road systems really, really well. And basically then the TAC would give him an okay or not okay and provide input. And then Tom Matson would bring that recommendation to our full board of supervisors to make the final allocations for roads. So hopefully that's the background that might help understand the two pieces.
I'm not totally clear though on what we're voting on today.
You're not. I was just giving
just an update.
I was just giving a report on where we're at in that process. Right. And I was just asking if you would like for it to be a formal thing brought back to this board to let HCOG be the ones who keep the transit part of the money, and go and work into a contract with the county.
Rather than the county contracting with the transit agencies.
Yes.
It would be the county contracting with
With
HCOG. HCOG would then work with the transit agencies, recommended and approved by the board.
Yes.
So that's what you're asking for today.
Yes. We can put it on a future agenda.
I think that would be, if we're gonna get to that formality, yeah.
That's good.
Don't you agree?
Yes, I agree.
Can I ask a process question? I know it's not PAC time anymore, but since this affects transit, is it okay, Chair Johnson? So the discussion we're having is about whether to agendize the conversation, not whether to take action today, right? And I just wanted to also clarify that since the city of Arcata voted on last night to bring all AMRT to merge our Arcata Mad River Transit with Humboldt Transit Authority, and because the paratransit is operated by contract under HTA's umbrella, I don't know what other applicants there would be. So I think functionally, I mean, there could be someone else who stands up a transit service that doesn't currently exist, but functionally, we're really talking about Humboldt Transit Authority being the applicant, unless we're talking about KCNet.
My understanding is that anybody who runs transit, so we have like the Humboldt Senior Resource Centers who have their paratransit,
I see. Okay.
they would be eligible for some of the funds. So anybody who runs a transit
Yeah.
is eligible for this fund.
Good point. I had not thought about that. Yeah, because the dial-a-ride service is something that we operate under, essentially with a partner. So.
Right, so
Great.
there would be a solicitation process of what the whole transit needs are.
Okay, thank you.
Fortuna Transit, can't forget that.
That's true. You are a rogue transit agency.
Rogues.
Yurok Tribe would also be another example.
All right, well, thank you for that, and yes, agendizing it and taking a formal action
Okay.
on it would be better.
I'll bring that back. The other thing I wanted to report on is the fiscal and compliance audits are due to the state controller by March 31st. You guys have not seen those yet because a couple of agencies have had a difficult time in getting information to Keith. I did get an update from him though that he's positive he's going to be able to get those to us for us to send to the state before the end of this month, and we do have him at the April meeting to present those to you, even though they're going to already be sent off to the state. And that's all I have.
Well, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, we come to Caltrans reports.
We have a few updates tonight. I have a few to go through, but I'm going to hand it over to Lorna, who is our climate change supervisor, and she's going to give an update on the Cape first.
Hi, thanks so much. Can you hear me? Sorry. Thanks
Yes.
for having me tonight. I just wanted to give a brief update because I know previously you all had requested an update on our corridor planning effort for the Eureka-Arcata corridor, and I wasn't able to make that last summer. So while I plan to come back this coming summer with a more detailed update, for the moment, I just wanted to let you know that in that time, we've built out the climate unit at Caltrans. So it's now myself and 3 staff, whereas previously it was just 1 person. We've also started taking a hard look at what our CAPE requirements are. And just as a reminder, the CAPE is the Comprehensive Adaptation and Implementation Plan that is being required by the California Coastal Commission for the Eureka-Arcata corridor. So we've done a fair bit of work on our timeline, rescoping, and we've begun early coordination with the county, the city, and some resource agencies. We've also been working with Cal Poly Humboldt on some technical studies, which we will make available to you all and the broader public very soon. But we have some site-specific modeling that really incorporates the drainages and the flow patterns, including wave and wind setup, which is something unique that things like the NOAA Sea Level Rise Viewer don't anticipate for. We've also been hosting technical advisory committee meetings with the Cal Poly Humboldt folks, and then, of course, the county and the cities. And at this point, we're really trying to facilitate meaningful engagement with the local landowners. So I did want to thank you all for your letter of support for the Murrayfield sea level rise feasibility planning study. We are on the Coastal Conservancy April agenda, but we're still working with the county to finalize details. So whether that gets pulled or not, we'll keep you posted, but I did want to thank you for your support letter. And then we also plan to begin outreach with places like Harper Motors this fall. And of course, the city of Eureka regarding Jacobs Avenue. We've started early conversations with Arcata as they own a lot of the land to the east on the north end of the corridor. And we'll start working with other adjacent landowners. So I will be going, if you remember, the original due date for this plan was December of 2025. I'll be going to the Coastal Commission this summer asking for a 2-year extension. So December 2027 is when Caltrans hopes to have that plan done. And that's because we want to have the time for that engagement with the county and the cities and all the local landowners. So I'm happy to come back this fall and or late summer and give a more detailed update that would include a map, timelines, and show you what potential treatment areas we're looking at and things like that, if that's useful.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Lorna. City of Eureka coordination. So we've been working with the City of Eureka to ensure that we're working together to prioritize safety and multimodal improvements on the state highway system through the city. We had our first meeting a few weeks ago and have decided to continue to meet regularly, so that's moving along. A new roundabout approval process. We are developing a Caltrans District 1 roundabout approval process, which will allow us to keep a consistent approach when it comes to approval of roundabouts on the state highway system. In December, new guidance was released for the Intersection Safety and Operational Assessment Process, or ISOP. It modified the requirements for traffic warrants for intersections, and many communities have requested Caltrans install roundabouts on high-speed state highways in their communities. So we're just trying to stay consistent with our message and pursuing this new approval process, and we expect it to be complete sometime this spring. Emergency projects for the State Route 36 slide work began in December, and crews continue to monitor and maintain the one-way traffic control, but it continues to slide. So since funds from the director's order are nearly used up, we'll be developing a supplemental director's order in the next couple of weeks to request additional funds. We currently have 31 active emergency projects in Humboldt County. The Indianola interchange progress. We're currently prepping to pour the bridge deck in April, which should be complete by July. Placement of lightweight fill foam blocks will begin in April. Also, soil fill will be put in place for raising the future grade of the highway. We are optimistic to have northbound and southbound traffic on the new alignment before the end of the year. The half signal at Airport Road will be installed in 2025, but it's at the discretion of the contractor. And work that is likely to be done in 2026 includes southbound on and off ramps, median closures, cable median barrier, miscellaneous drainage work, erosion control, and plantings. We're beginning work on a signage plan for the Pacific Coast Bike Route. It will inventory existing PCBR signs, assess signage needs, propose phased improvements to wayfinding, support route consistency, and improve cyclist safety. The PCBR passes through Humboldt County, mostly on US 101, but there are areas of the route where it deviates to local roads. So we'll be working with the local agencies on those sections of the route in the coming months. The plan only addresses alternate routes that have already been designated as official scenic alternatives, and new designations to the route would be a separate effort. The district transit plan kicked off a couple of weeks ago. It is a 2-year effort, and we'll be working closely with HTA during its development. The plan will identify transit needs on the state highway system. The Annette Brooks Memorial Bridge dedication will be April 16th in Scotia. And Caltrans will be hosting our annual Tribal Transportation Summit for the Northern District Tribes in April in Crescent City. And last, the Caltrans Milestone Report. Amy shared the most recent version ahead of today's meeting. It contains the Project Initiation Document, or PID list, a report with all Caltrans current projects and a summary of their status, and a map showing where projects are occurring within the county. So if there's any questions, please feel free to let me know. And I'm going to introduce Jesse Robertson. He is our System Planning Supervisor, District 1, and he's going to give an update on the State Route 255 Corridor Management Plan.
Thank you. Can you all hear me? Thank you for having me here tonight. I'm relatively new here to the system planning branch. This is the first corridor management plan that this unit has produced under my oversight here. We have just released on Friday, March 14th. We released the public draft of the 255 corridor management plan. We are asking for the public to provide any comments back to us by May 23rd this year, and on April 24th, we will be having a public meeting at the Manila Community Center. That meeting was requested by Manila residents when we did a kind of a town hall meeting back in June of 2024. So that meeting is mostly going to be kind of a walkthrough of the document itself. Did we hear what the public had communicated to us, and how well do we reflect that? So that is going to give them some orientation of the document. So it'll hopefully speed up that review. You know, it's I think a little over 2 months time period for them to go through the document, give us feedback, and then hopefully we could publish a final plan here in June of this year. So, one thing to note: the corridor management plans is kind of a new document for Caltrans, relatively new. They came out after SB 1 was passed. The California Transportation Commission has some guidelines for what they call a comprehensive multimodal corridor plan. That guidance is really oriented towards projects that are maybe competing for solutions for congested corridor program funding. That's not really applicable to District 1. The one spot we think in the district where that grant program funding could apply, it might be Broadway and Eureka. So this is, excuse me, this is a little bit more like the traditional transportation concept reports that you might be familiar with. That was our long-range planning document for Caltrans for state routes within District 1 prior to the corridor management plan. And so this document's a little bit of a hybrid between the two. We do look at active transportation modes a little bit more scrupulously than I think in the past. We also focus on the climate action plan for transportation infrastructure, or CAPTI, which is state guidance material. And we also look at the freight guidance that the states developed for corridor management plans. And the concept of these new emphasis areas is to look at not just the state highway system, but at the corridor as a whole, to see if there's alternatives to widening or expanding the state highway system. Part of that is recognizing we're not going to try to build our way out of every congestion problem that arises, that we're going to try to explore multimodal options. So new to this plan from some of the source documents that we looked at, which include the 2005 Manila Transportation Plan, the 2013 Caltrans Engineered Feasibility Study for State Route 255, and the 2017 Transportation Concept Report for State Route 255. We've also recognized the Arcata Gateway Area Plan and the SAMSIP grant project that's underway in the city of Arcata. And we've done some extensive outreach, including to HCOG, Beth Burks. We met with HTA, Humboldt Transit Authority. We met with the city of Eureka, the city of Arcata, the county of Humboldt. We've met with Coastal Conservancy, Great Roaded Trail Agency, with the Humboldt Harbor District, Harbor Recreation Conservation District. So we've met with a number of agencies to try to establish, some kind of guidelines for what Caltrans projects can consider in the future when they're developing, Caltrans projects. There are other areas like the development of the Great Redwood Trail Spur alignment that parallels 255 between the Samoa Bridges New Navy Base Road and the city of Arcata, that is really within the jurisdiction of the Great Redwood Trail Agency. Caltrans is likely to partner with them on funding, but also there's probably locations within Manila especially that we anticipate some trail crossings established. So we would do some enhanced highway crossings probably at those locations. And there's also a number of locations in Arcata that may warrant some multimodal crossing improvements. And some of those plans are still ongoing. So this document takes kind of a accommodating perspective. We're supportive of our partner agency goals, and we will not prescribe the exact improvements that are going to take place. That's kind of the responsibility of the project developers. This plan itself is going to just recognize that those things are expected, and we agree to partner with some of our agencies that also have jurisdiction within the corridor. Let's see. So in addition, we're supportive of Humboldt Transit Authority goals. I think they're looking at a micro transit service. There are some improvement types that we don't anticipate adequate funding to address within the 20-year time horizon of this plan. Those concepts will be part of this ultimate concept. We say when funding becomes available, we expect to address these issues, but within the 20-year time horizon, we don't expect that funding to be available. And that could change depending on federal funding bills or other state initiatives. So we did provide a copy of the plan to HCOG staff. The website, the document is built on a kind of a GIS platform called StoryMap. It has interactive maps that you can look at, some detailed information about adjacent land use and community characteristics. Some of that information is useful for grant applicants. Maybe useful for grant applicants like the Active Transportation Program. And we also posted the plan on our website. It's a little bit hard to find. It's in the District 1 regional and system planning web page, which is kind of buried. You have to follow a lot of links to get there. So I would recommend that if you know anybody who's interested in reviewing the plan, to contact HCOG, and they could contact me, and we can send out links. HCOG is welcome to share that link as well. So with that, that's what I have for you today. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions? Yes.
Hi, thanks for that report. I'm curious about Samoa Bridge modifications. We had brought that forward our last meeting, and I'm curious, pedestrian change, bicycle widening underneath, what are we looking at there?
Yeah, so for that, we kind of drew upon the findings of the 2013 engineered feasibility study. That put a cost estimate on the types of improvements that Caltrans would consider. Right now, the bridge, I think, has 11-foot travel lanes and 4-foot shoulders, which, the shoulders themselves don't meet our standards for bike lanes or there's no pedestrian accommodation. There's no sidewalks or grade separated area for pedestrians. So based on that, it's not designated as a bike route. It is not prohibited. It's actually, we have a freeway agreement with the city of Eureka, a freeway agreement with the county of Humboldt. And typically bikes and peds are prohibited because of lack of alternate routes. It's open for bike and ped travel, but it's not it's not a location where we can build something that's going to meet our standards. So in the meantime, we're saying, you can use the shoulders for bike and ped travel. It's part of our long-term goals to try to add those facilities. The scope of the improvements were estimated in 2013 to cost somewhere between $17 and $44 million. I think in this day and age, I was telling people it would cost $5 to $6 million for roundabout construction. We're building a roundabout up in Del Norte County that's $11.4 million. Since COVID, I think some of the costs have gone up dramatically. So I think those bridge costs would be considerably more than what that 2013 study projected. But it's probably a 50-year-old bridge. It has probably an 80 to 100, maybe 120-year life expectancy. So having funding available from the Caltrans Bridge program seems unlikely for the next 30 years, I would say. So in the meantime, we're looking at other options like transit. Humboldt Transit Authority said that they would like to implement a micro transit service that would be demand responsive, and they would pick up residents on the Samoa Peninsula, Manila, Fairhaven, Samoa, and shuttle them to either Arcata or Eureka to the nearest transit stop, and provide an alternative to having to walk across the Samoa bridges. So we're looking at those types of alternatives until some funding comes available, because of the expense of the bridge program, the availability of surplus funding really doesn't exist. So, it would probably take a federal act to try to get those types of improvements developed on an ad hoc basis. So for that reason, we're saying it's part of the ultimate concept. We just don't expect that funding to be available anytime soon.
So part of the conversation, and I don't recall if it was after the meeting or during the meeting, was that when Samoa Bridge was put in 1975-76, there were no accommodations made for pedestrians, but now Madaket, or the ferry, is no longer available. So they used the Madaket to cross. Now they don't use the Madaket to cross or whatever, but it was the Madaket, even though I wasn't around back then. So I'm curious, is it, just a clarification, is it the responsibility of Caltrans to provide that if, in fact, Madaket or the ferry was closed out at that time? I'm just curious about that.
In conversations about this corridor management plan, a ferry service was put out there for consideration. I don't know that there's what funding might be available for that. I think it's an interesting option. There are ferries in the Bay Area. Part of it may be, is it cost effective to run a service like that? So that could be something that we consider. That might be something that we work. There'd have to be a funding or an operating agency for us to work with to establish something like that. Maybe it could draw from transit service funding. I think the Yurok tribe has a river ferry that they operate. So I think there may be public funds available, but it's not something that we're particularly familiar with up here, and I don't know how well organized, a ferry service, how well prepared we are to operate something like that here locally. Something to be looked into. I think it could be kind of a public-private partnership effort, but lacking anybody stepping up offering to make those types of services available. It remains a concept, I think, at this point. So,
okay, thank you for that. I guess I wasn't clear with my question. So when the bridge was put in, there was a service that used to take people across the bay, right? And that's been taken away, correct? So people have to take the bridge. So at that time, were pedestrians and cyclists not considered? Is that why there were no accommodations at that time? Or, I'm curious, is that a responsibility that should have taken place at that time.
Yeah,
What are
well,
your
I
thoughts on
can't
that?
really speak to what service was available and or who provided it. We did do some kind of historical searching. It was a federal project, I think, that was maybe funded when the Redwood National Park was established. It might have been an effort to help bolster the timber industry at a time when the federal government was acquiring private timber lands for the National Park Service. So at that time, it was developed as a freeway, and freeways typically prohibit bikes and peds. So it's not something that we would typically allow. I think we do allow it now because of the lack of alternatives, but at the time it wasn't developed for bike and ped facilities. So we're kind of stuck with what we have for the time being.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I appreciate those questions. I mean, back before the bridges, a lot of Eurekans were working on the peninsula at the mills and other things. So it was quite a high demand, right? There was a lot of people. So it helped pay for that ferry service. When you did your cost estimates of, 16 to 40 million, and you said even higher now, was that just to widen the structure on top, or did you look at costs for cantilevering or hanging underneath, or as options?
We have had, there's been a couple of Manila residents that have asked for a cantilevered structure. At one point, I think it was when we were preparing the 2017 Transportation Concept Report, we did contact our headquarters structures office, and we had a specific material that we were asked to look into, and we were told that hadn't been approved for that specific use. I think it. I've talked to Manila residents about the liability of putting something out over the water, and if it doesn't meet structural standard, it collapses. Anybody on it's gonna plummet, right? So I think for that reason, that's another concept that we could consider, if suitable materials are developed. But I think our headquarters structures office, they'll look at any attachments onto a bridge for the structural sufficiency to support that additional weight. And I think the engineered feasibility study in 2013 assumed that additional supports would be needed. And so they looked at extended the bridge caps, which kind of support the bridge structure. And so they would require additional piling sunk into the bay. So that was kind of the approach that the engineered feasibility study took.
Okay. Well, maybe in 20 years we'll be beam me up, Scotty, and we'll just zoom right over there.
Something.
I appreciate that you've reached out to the Great Redwood Trail Agency, because we're doing a lot of corridor planning, as you know, as well, between Samoa and Arcata. I sit on the Great Redwood Trail Board, just for disclosure, and we have a master plan, a draft master plan, and there is a map and a section on, Arcata to Manila and Samoa. We are currently moving forward with a planning exercise in Samoa on a 4-mile section that brings us over to the bridge structures, basically. And it's being designed as a rail with trail, because the Timber Heritage Association has a dream of one day running trains around the bay. We built the entire Bay Trail as a rail with trail project, and it increased the cost dramatically to do that. So there is this trail corridor that's available. Many people will say that the economics are not here to support a train all the way around the bay. The skunk train is struggling, and part of that's their collapsed tunnel down by Fort Bragg and other things. But we just don't have the same input of funding like Fort Bragg does closer to the Bay Area. But a train that might run from Samoa at the Roundhouse to Arcata, a short run. I mean, the skunk train has 2 short runs now, and they're still incredibly popular. It'd be a neat thing if it could happen. But at any rate, so as we're planning the Great Redwood Trail, we're looking at options. And I agree with you and appreciate that you've contacted our staff and are looking at that, because I think we're going to have a lot of opportunity to work together. For instance, in the Manila to Arcata corridor, there are several options for our trail. Do you widen the shoulders of the highway? Do you build it on the rail tracks themselves? Do you add fill next to the railroad tracks in our corridor to do rail with trail, but that's all wetlands? Given the fact that the Department of Fish and Wildlife is buying up almost all of the land between Samoa Boulevard and the bay, and that it's getting harder and harder to maintain that levee along the shoreline, especially with sea level rise, putting even more pressure on it. And it won't be that long into the future to where almost all that land is owned by the state of California, and is going to probably remove that levee. And so there's an opportunity to build a setback levee next to Samoa Boulevard on the south side that could have the trail on top of it, right? So there's all these different options, and we have no idea what we're going to do. But I appreciate that you've reached out, and I look forward to continued collaboration and seeing where our planning might work in a way to where, rather than trying to widen the shoulders on Samoa Boulevard, if we could have a separate pathway on a setback levee next to the boulevard, that would be a pretty awesome option. But again, thank you for reaching out to them, and I look forward to discussing those options more and seeing how we can work together.
Great.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Mr. Robertson? Thank you. Thanks for the report, and again, for the collaboration.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Does that wrap it up for?
Yes, that's all I have. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. We come now to PAC and board member reports, and I'm often remiss in this, so I'm going to call upon Supervisor Arroyo first tonight.
So exciting. Thank you. I don't have a lot to report. This is one of those days where I don't have a ton. I guess I have some somewhat good news. I don't know if y'all have been following the transit allocations in the, at the state level and in the continuing resolution at the federal level, but they don't seem to have changed substantively. The governor's budget is, of course, still going through the process of kind of the process at the state level. Suffice to say, it seems like the proposal is to keep the transportation allocations what they were in the last multi-year allocation phase or cycle. So, and to my great surprise, the federal continuing resolution doesn't seem to have made substantive changes to transit either. So even though those were rumored. So that is some good news for now, and I think I'll have more for you next month. The other exciting part was that Arcata Mad River Transit and HTA are going to officially fully merge, which will help with a lot of operational efficiencies and just clarity for riders and making it easier to change between systems and maintain and staff those lines. So all of that is good news for the efficiency of the region.
All right. Well, thank you. Yes.
So good to see you back. Thank you for your duties with your Coastie responsibilities. At the last HTA meeting, we also approved, I believe, bringing Dial-A-Ride under HTA management directly rather than a contract, I believe. So they were talking a lot about how that will improve the service tremendously. So another thing being brought in under that umbrella. So.
Thank you very much. Yes, Supervisor Madrona is my alternate for HTA and went to that meeting. And so lots of efficiency to be realized there. And then one place to go with concerns or recommendations. So I think, but I appreciate folks pointing out that there are other transit providers, small but mighty, that we work closely with as well.
Any other board member reports? I see none. Well, I believe at this time we can adjourn our open session meeting and adjourn to a closed session regarding executive director recruitment under 54957B1. The HCOG board will meet in closed session regarding the executive director recruitment process. So at this time, we will adjourn. Thank you.
Pay no attention to the man behind the door. There is one back there.
All right, we're back in session to report out on our closed session. And at this time, we don't have anything to report. Okay, well, we do have something to report. I didn't want to steal your thunder, but we did hire Mr. Brendan Bird as our new executive director for HCOG, and we all look forward to seeing him hit the ground running. So, thank you. And we are adjourned again.